Man, which batteries should I get? Should I get lead acid batteries or should I get lithium? Because man, there's a big difference in costs. Or is there? Hi everyone, welcome to Tigner Adventures. My name's David, my wife Ninette, and our little cat Tansy. We live in our rig full time, and we are currently still in northern Utah. And I am helping my brother-in-law, my sister. We're staying at their place that they have a new home that they're building, and we're just kind of mooch docking. In our particular case, when we say mooch docking, we're just parking here. We just happen to have a place to park. This is what I've been working on for the last little while, and it's just all this concrete and this house, and I'll tell you, getting everything ready, little odd jobs here and there. It has been a busy time. And so by the time the day is over, man, I'm usually pretty exhausted. You know, I'm used to being retired. I don't know about all this work stuff, but you know what? This isn't about me. This is about you, and this is our last little discussion that we're going to have about our solar and usage, power usage and things like that, and that is our batteries. I keep saying the batteries are the brains of the whole operation, and so today I wanted to kind of concentrate on batteries just a little bit more and kind of go through that, and hopefully you guys will understand it. I want to tell you too, I am not trying to talk you into not having solar or anything along that lines. All I'm trying to do is give you a lot of different information, make you ask questions, because there are a lot of things that you have to decide that's more specific to you, okay? I can do whatever I want, and I've done it, all right? But what you do is important for you and your lifestyle. So you have to make those decisions as to what you want. So I always tell people, you don't have to put your own solar system in. You don't have to do your own wiring or anything. But what you do need to know is how it works, all right? So you can have someone else put it in. That's not a problem. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it and things like that, then please get somebody else that can, and we'll do it correctly. But once that's done, make sure that they explain it to you so that you understand how it all works. I had an issue with an individual. They said, hey, you know what, my solar's not working, can you look at this and everything? And you know, after taking a couple hours of digging through everything, there was a couple things that I noticed. First of all, they couldn't raise their panels, and it was winter time, so they weren't getting as much production. Well, into talking to them, they said, well, they asked me about that, but I said, there's no way I'm ever getting on the roof of my RV. Well, if they're never going to get up there, then they're never going to get raised, so why spend the extra money? The second thing was they didn't understand that they couldn't run their little heater buddy, you know, all night long, which they did, and that's why their batteries were completely dead in the morning. So you got to be careful what your power usage is, and that's why we've kind of gone through that. If you want to run your power buddy all night long, then you need to have enough batteries to be able to sustain that usage all night long. So those are things that you need to understand when someone else puts it in for you. There's nothing wrong with having someone else do the work for you, especially if you don't have the knowledge of how to do it or the time. So it's just, you need to understand it so that you can use your rig and enjoy your time out full timing, or just out boondocking and having a weekend away, whatever it might be. So to start off with, I'm going to explain a little bit about batteries. Now, I've already mentioned that batteries deal, everything with batteries is dealt on with amp hours, all right? Each battery is rated so many amp hours. And so the first thing I want to show you here is our battery bank. So we're going to go back to our batteries again. And if you look here within our battery compartment, remember the batteries are the brains. But in this particular case, I have 6 Trojan batteries. And so you can count them. It's easy to see. Each group of those 3 orange caps, which are monitoring my water level in this case because I have lead acid, is 1 battery. And you'll notice that here, 1 battery, and here is the other battery. And then, so there's 2 batteries there, 2 batteries in the middle, and 2 batteries in the back. Now, these batteries are wired in a way that produces, and in my case, each battery is only 6 volts. So what I do is I have my positive over here, and then I have my negative here. And then this negative goes from here to the positive over here on this battery. And then the negative is over here on this battery. Now that is tying them together in series, and when I do that, it increases the voltage. So there's 6 volts and 6 volts gives me 12 volts. The batteries are rated 240 amp hours each, but because I'm putting them together in series, my amp hours stay at 240 and my volts increase. Now if I go back, all right, so basically what's happened here is each one of these 2 sets of batteries all wired in series. Then over here on the left in the far back, the negative from each battery set of batteries is connected together all the way up to here. And if you look, this is my big cable coming off my last negative going up to my shunt, all right, which was what we've been talking about with the app that everything gets monitored through. If I look over here on the left, here's my positives going from this battery to that battery to that battery, and then it goes up in a big cable out of that positive. And so what's happening is it's taking the positive from way back here and working everything through here to come out this negative. And by taking each bank of 2 and connecting them together, what I'm doing is by putting all the positives together and by putting all the negatives together is I'm hooking those together in parallel mode. And each set of 2 I connect to the next set. Doesn't change my voltage, keeps it at 12 volts, but it does increase my amp hours. So I add all my amp hours together. So there's 240 amp hours here, 240 amp hours there, 240 amp hours back there, giving me a total of 720 amp hours because they're all in parallel. And by doing the parallel thing, making it parallel is just hooking all the positives together and all the negatives together. But it's important that your main positive lead is the far end of the battery bank back over here, and your negative is the complete opposite over here. And then that way it's pulling power through the whole bank of batteries and keeping all of the different batteries at the same voltages and working on them all at the same place. So that is 2 6 volts to make 12 volts. That's my system, okay, which is my lead acid batteries. And each one of these batteries was just over $100 a piece. So now let's talk about lithium. Most lithium batteries are going to be 12 volts already. And so lithium batteries are rated at 100 amp hours typically. So for my 240 amp hours, I can only get 120 amp hours out of my lead acid, all right? Lithium is 100 amp hours, and for the most part I can get all 100 amp hours. So basically it's 20 amp hours less than what I can get with my lead, all right? But lithium batteries at the time I put these in were $1,000 a piece. So major difference in the cost there, and I was just starting out, didn't know anything for one thing, and really didn't have the money to be putting a lot into lithium. Let's talk about lithium today compared to lead acid. I looked up these same lead acid batteries now on Amazon, and it's $200 per battery. So that means now it's costing me $400 for basically 120 amp hours of use. So 400, and where's lithium at? Guess what? There are some manufacturers now, you can get lithium, 100 amp hour lithium, for as low as about $650. So it's getting really difficult not to say let's go with lithium, because there are other advantages to lithium, because you don't have to manage the water, you get the full usage of it, you can go day after day after day using those lithiums, and it'll just slowly keep going down until it gets down to 0, and then just charge them all at once, like put a generator on and charge them all at once, or you just weren't getting very much solar, and so finally you get a good day and it charges all at once. Lead really wants to be recharged every day to 100%. If you don't, then that doesn't, lead batteries don't like that very much. So big advantage to lithium in that particular case. All right, so those are the 2 things you got to keep in mind. Look at the pricing and then make your choice. All right, I would say if you're just starting out, you want to go with a minimum of 200 amp hours, which would be like 2 12-volt lithium batteries put together in parallel, meaning the 12 volt stays together, but you put both batteries together. You've taken the far positive and run it into your system, and the far negative, opposite of the positive, and ran that into your system. You get 200 amp hours of use, okay, at roughly, $1,200 or so. But that's the thing you have to look at. But I'm just saying that if you're just going to start out, it's good to at least get 2 batteries. All right, just trying to run things on 1 battery is really, really limiting. And the more that you want to run, the more batteries you want to have. I know one person, I've seen their rig, 16, all right, lithium batteries. That's a lot of power, and they can do pretty much anything they want for as long as they want, because they have so many amp hours. That is 1,600 amp hours. I mean, that's a lot of money. Now let's talk about another thing with batteries that people really need to pay attention. When you put together your battery bank, you really need to look at how many amp hours, how much power are you going to draw at any one time. The more amps that you want to draw, and the distance that has to pull that power from the batteries determines the size of the cable that's going to be connected to your batteries. Now, the smaller the number, the bigger the wire, which is kind of a weird way to look at it. If you refer back to my picture of my batteries, you'll see I'm actually running 2-gauge wire from each battery, because the power going between each battery, 2-gauge can handle just fine. I'm actually running 1/0, so it's like this big around. Okay, see how big that is? 1/0 wire. It's really, really heavy welding cable. All right, and that's what I'm using to go from my batteries into my inverter, also from my solar charger into my batteries, is 1/0 wire. So it's a lot bigger, because all that's coming in at one time. Running off my roof remember, each one of my solar panels has a 10-gauge wire, but once it goes through the combiner box, it goes into 1-gauge, and it goes 1-gauge wire, which is a little heavier, down to my solar controller, and that's where it's all put together, and all of a sudden I've got 56 amps going into my batteries. And so, all I'm doing is, the bigger the wire, the cooler it will run, and the more throughput you get out of the wire. So, as an example, let me show you this little demo of what I'm talking about that I think will make more sense to you. I am going to reference our power usage based on water. You guys know what, like your hose that you hook to your rig and how much water you get out of it. This is like our little 4-gauge wire. All right, you can see it's a fairly small hole. There's only so much water I can push through this little pipe, and that's all I can get through it, period, right? Then I go up to 2-gauge. You can see this is a lot bigger pipe, and I can get a lot more throughput through there. I can get a lot more water out the other end. Well, if we go to our 1/0, wow, that can get some serious water going through that pipe, and you can really flood things out pretty fast with that series of water, right? So that's the same thing with wire. And so the bigger the wire, the heavier around the wire is, okay, is the more the energy can flow through that faster. And the current, we rate everything on current, right? Our amp hour current being used based on our app. It's the bigger the wire, the more current that can go through that without being restricted. And so you get a lot more throughput, and in that particular case, in the case of wire, it doesn't heat up. Now, our water, we just get restricted to this. Our pipe doesn't heat up and melt, but let me tell you, your wire can. If you're pulling too much current, it can overheat your wire and melt your wire. And so that is why they stress the size of wires so much, is because there are rigs that have burned down from that. And so it is more important to make sure you have a little bit bigger wires than it's better safe to have bigger than smaller. Okay, so maybe that's a little dramatic, and I don't want to scare anybody, but electricity is not something to be playing around with, because it does kill, and people can get seriously hurt on that. So we just want to make sure that what we're doing is the safe way to do things. And that's why we also have a lot of different fuses in the system, is because if, things do heat up or something like that, then the fuses will blow before the wiring melts. And so when you are gauging your fuses, you look at what size wire you're using, and then you put in a fuse that can handle that. So in my particular case, I'm using 1/0, and I have a 100 amp fuse that goes from my solar controller to my batteries to make sure that if something happens there, if things start getting, if they short or they get hot for some reason, then the amp or the circuit breaker will pop, and that's what saves your rig from catching on fire or you getting hurt. The same thing happens in your actual AC electrical panel, right? You have little breakers that you flip on and off, and they're designed to pop off if you get some type of a extra load that it can't handle. For example, my rig is rated at 30 amps, but I could easily try turning on both air conditioners. I could turn my fireplace, electric fireplace on, things like that, my water heater, and all of a sudden I'm pulling more than 30 amps out of that pole that is rated at 30 amps, and so the circuit breaker will blow. So I'm sure some of you guys have ran into that a little bit, and that's a safety feature for making sure that you are safe and you don't have some bad experience. All right, back to the old analogy that the batteries are the brains of your system. The way to determine how many batteries you actually need to control your system is also based on how much you want to use it and for how long. That will determine how many batteries that you actually need to purchase. So then, determining on how many batteries that you finally decide that you need will help you figure out exactly how much solar you need, or the charger that you want to get to be able to charge up those batteries when you need to actually charge them. And also, it depends, when it comes to solar, what time of year are you calculating that usage? If you're going to be doing a lot of things during the winter time, you probably either need to tilt your panels or you need to actually purchase more panels so that you get a little bit more solar production to get those charged back up again. One thing to remember is you can always add more panels, so you don't have to buy a whole bunch up front. You can buy a certain amount and check things out and decide, you know what, I need to buy some more, or maybe your budget's that way too, right? I don't have a lot of money right now, but I can buy a little bit at a time. And so in that particular case, the first thing I'm going to invest in is some batteries. Then I'm going to have a generator that charges those batteries. And then I'm going to start buying some solar panels so I don't have to run my generator. So that's basically how we did our system. And then if you do a little bit here and there, it's kind of like the big elephant, right? You're not just dealing with the whole elephant at once. You're just taking a bite here, a bite there, until you get done. So I do want to emphasize a couple different things. I mentioned wire size is a big thing, right? So when you're buying your wire, if you look in our comments, I've got some references there, and the things I want to point out about those is you've got to be really careful what wire you buy. Do not buy aluminum clad wire. It looks like copper, but it's aluminum. Okay, that stuff is not good. And so if you look at the link I put in there, this is actual copper welding cable, and so it's a very high current cable, and you can choose which size you want. The reference I put in there was for 2 gauge, but you can, when you're in Amazon site, you can change that to whatever gauge you want. And yes, copper does cost more money, but you need to use copper. It carries more current, and it doesn't melt as easy as aluminum does. The site that I referenced there also comes with connectors that you can actually put onto the ends of the cables. Now I built mine, I custom built them, so they are exactly the sizes they need to be to go from each battery, and from the battery to wherever it's going to connect to the rig and things like that. To me, that's the better way to do it. And so I've also got references to lugs. You can choose what size the hole is that's going to connect into wherever it's got to connect to on your rig or whatever device it's connecting to. Plus, there's different ways you put those lugs on. And what I used was the one I referenced as a hammer one, where you put the lug in the cable in there and you take a hammer and you just smack it really hard and it crimps the cable down, and that's one way to do it. They do have crimpers now that are fairly inexpensive too, so you can kind of choose between the two and decide which one you want. One thing I would caution you against is do not solder your lugs onto your cables. I did that to start with, but one of the things I found out was that The problem with soldering the lugs on is that if you do build up any kind of heat, you know, solder melts really at a low temperature, right? That's why you can solder wires and things like that, because it melts at a low temperature. So if your wires start getting warm, then what can happen is the solder can melt, and then the cable comes out and you short out things or whatever case, all right? So it's just not a good thing to do. So that was a learning curve. I took all that out and redid all the wires and crimped them all, and it's been really good. The other thing is when you do crimp them, put some heat shrink around them. Get some good heat shrink that's got the glue inside of it, and it keeps the moisture out and everything, and heat shrink those, and then it keeps them looking really good, and then you don't have issues with corrosion and stuff. Now also if you go to Renogy.com, they sell solar panels, but they also have a calculator there, and you can go in there and figure out the size of wire you want. Now basically, if you're going to be dealing in the 100 amp hours, 150 amp hours, things like that of draw, you're going to always want to go with at least a 1/0 cable. So that's the bigger cable, right? And I would for sure go with at least a 2 gauge from battery to battery. Maybe even higher, especially if you're going to lithium, because you can pull up to 200 amp hours at any one time on lithium, or at least most of them, and so you may want to rate your cable even higher than that 1/0. Go to a 2/0, okay? So it's a lot heavy dutier, and then that way you don't have anything getting too hot. All right, well, I think I've covered everything. You know, I try to make a list of all the things that I need to do to make sure that I've got things covered for you, but you know, sometimes I forget, and that's where the questions come in. So ask those questions. I'll be glad to answer those. Again, I have put some references in our comments of things that we are talked about today, so that you can go out and look at those different things. Whether you use them or not, I mean, that's up to you. In fact, you know, like if you don't like the hammer crimper and you like something else, that, you know, at least I'm just showing you this stuff so that you can look this up and decide if you want to do that. If you do use those links, we do receive, you know, some little percentage of commission from that, so we do appreciate that, and we do appreciate all the support that we get from you guys. Please ask us questions. I'll be glad to either point you to the right people or the right sites, whatever the case may be, to help you out and try to get you going on the system that you want, all right, without spending a lot of money. Again, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, please find a tech that can do it for you. Make sure you get references from them. Look at some of the systems they've done, because I have seen some that aren't the most desirable systems, and I've made comments to the techs and said you could at least put the zip ties on things and cut the zip ties off, and why are you know, doing things a certain particular way, and you know, they try to come up with some excuse, but you know, I'd rather have people that do a nice clean job up front and they know what they're talking about. So make sure that you do your research, get some recommendations. If you have any questions, again, let me know. Glad to help out. All right, so that kind of ends this little thing. As you noticed, when I first started, there was a lot of concrete that got put down. Guess what? We're not going anywhere for at least 3 weeks. We got to wait for that concrete to cure, and so we're going to be kind of stuck in northern Utah for another 3 more weeks, and then we're going to start working our way south for the winter. So my next video is going to actually start off, I think I may have said this in some other videos that I was going to do this, but I'm going to start now actually going through different apps and explaining what those, you know, apps do for us and how they can help you, you know, within your travels or your planning stages and things like that. So stay tuned for the next video after this. It will be starting out, the first one I'm going to start out with is RV Trip Wizard, because we use that quite extensively, and so I'm going to take a couple videos just to kind of explain those things out a little bit, and I'm going to make the videos, probably going to try to make the videos a little bit shorter, so that you can just jump in and look at something and get what you need. But anyway, that's where we're going, so hopefully you'll come along with us, and we'll see you down the road.